Hello, I'm Bob Gorley, the Chief Technology Officer of OODA LLC. This recording captures content from our 18 October 2022 OODAcon. OODAcon was an event designed to bring together people from our community to talk about this age of exponential innovation and disruption so we can all learn how to better survive and thrive. We titled this session, Canceling the Apocalypse, Funding the Next Generation of Innovation. Why do we call it Canceling the Apocalypse? Look, there's a lot of scary things going on right now, from global war, famine in many parts of the world, outrageous inflation. There's also a need for new ways of exploring and finding energy. There's a need for continuously improving healthcare and preparing to fight future pandemics. There's a need to understand better space and how to leverage space for the benefit of all mankind. Well, for this and many other reasons, canceling the apocalypse is a key topic. To help us think through this topic, we asked Matt O'Connell, an operating partner at DCVC, and Zach Beecher, the Chief of Staff of America's Frontier Fund, to provide their insights into how to invest for next generation innovation.
Thanks for joining us. This topic has come up multiple times. We saw even in the last panel around this, the increase in attention around what we call kind of national security investing and American competitiveness. So first, what I'd love is for you guys just to kind of give an overview of your background and how you came to this space, and then I have a long list of questions. So Zach, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks, and great to be here, and thank you again, Matt and Bob, for the opportunity to represent America's Frontier Fund here. So my name is Zach Beecher. I'm the Chief of Staff at America's Frontier Fund. Come with a background as an Army officer, and then was in corporate innovation and venture previous to my role at America's Frontier Fund. And actually, to introduce AFF, I'd really like to almost emphasize and recast some of the comments that I've heard out here today, which is really a requirement for thinking outside the box to face down some of the challenges that we face in this century as we look at a decade that promises extraordinary innovation, even greater than the last 5 decades. And what America's Frontier Fund is an effort with a North Star to really capture the full attitude and capabilities needed to really bridge that moment as a public-private initiative. So we're a nonprofit, tax-exempt investment fund. We're currently raising, so if you know any LPs, let me know. But in all seriousness, we're targeting microelectronics, artificial intelligence, quantum information systems, and advanced manufacturing, because we believe that that is going to be some of the decisive key terrain, both economically, militarily, for the progress of markets and our nation and our partners over this next century. We'd love to get into the capabilities that we're bringing to really bridge it and make sure that we can facilitate the cooperation between government and private to really unleash the capability of these new markets. So look forward to the conversation, and thanks again.
Thanks. Matt?
Yeah, thanks for including us, and thanks for having us. It's great to see old friends. I see an old friend, Lewis Shepard. Like Lewis, I failed as a musician, and so I became a venture capitalist, sort of a natural progression. There actually is a tie. As Zach said, what we do as venture capitalists, we think outside the box. One of the guys, I built a company called GeoEye that did Earth observation. It was satellites, and we sold that in 2013. But while we were there, Marty Fega, who ran the NRO, said to me, "I figured you out. You don't think outside the box. You don't have a box." I said, "Why would I have a flipping box?" So we always look outside the box, and what we do at DCVC is we invest in companies that use deep tech to solve trillion-dollar problems, often in industries that haven't been disturbed in a while. We are not raising money. We just finished raising DCVC 6. I've lost track at this point. We've raised, I guess, over $4 billion and invested it in companies like Planet Labs and Capella and Rocket Labs. And we do a lot of bio. Bio is done quite well, but we do a lot in climate and a lot in defense and intel. And what I do is I spend most of my time trying to help the young companies in defense and intel grow. Bob Gorley was asking me earlier about what we thought of the mood, and I think the mood is pretty good right now. But wait to hear what you think.
Great. Well, thank you. I did want to highlight, and Bob alluded to this. He and I did this whiteboard sketch the other day, and we tracked down AFF doing a multi-billion-dollar raise. Hopefully, good luck with that. DCVC, you mentioned, has raised multiple billions. According to news articles, Thomas Tull raising multiple billions with a focus in the space. Our friends at Razor's Edge just closed a fund for $340 million, I think, also focused on the space. So my question to you is, national security has been an issue for a while. Why now, with such intense focus and so much money flowing into this space? How do you define the problem space, and what threat are we trying to protect against? So Matt, let's start with you.
Okay, why now? The FT recently had a conference investing in space, and the mood was really downbeat because the market is so screwy if you're in the finance business. And I said, I understand that the younger folks here are worried about their mortgages and their tuitions, but from my perspective, everything's marked down for sale. And when money doesn't look good in traditional investing circumstances, venture capital looks better. I mean, yeah, you could put your money in a bank and you might get 1/1000th of 1% or something like that. Or you could invest with us. You're probably not going to lose your money, and you could make a lot of money. I mean, our second fund was defined as the Sentinel-1 fund. If you were in cyber then, and if you're in cyber now, you can make a lot of money with the right people. So it's a great time from a sort of macroeconomic stand, even though it's not a great time for most people. I mean, inflation's not good. The other thing is that defense and intel is counter-cyclical. We just met with all of our limited partners out in Palo Alto. And one of my partners came up to me and said, a little grimly, he said, I think the companies you work with are probably making more money than anybody else right now. I said, except for the bio guys. But, we're very busy in Ukraine. In fact, I've spent half of my day in my room working on press stuff for those guys. There's a lot of unhappiness in the world, and there are growing threats. We had the peace dividend a while ago. The older people will remember the whole famous Clinton peace dividend. There is no looming outbreak of peace, and Putin reminded us of that. So we all realize the urgency with which we have to adapt to the future. There was a one named Bobby Lankowski on my board, and Bobby used to say, if you always ask for what you always got, you'll always get what you always got. And we've got to invent new ways. We've got to think outside the box. So given the fact that people have made money, there's still a tremendous appetite. I think that GOR was the first space company created in the last 20 years to sell for $1 billion. And when we did that, people said, wow, you can really make money. So it's been proven. There's a lot of good stuff out there. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. But when you do that, you can achieve the trifecta of helping your country, helping your investors, and, in our case, we often can also protect the environment. So it's a great time for us, but it's a great time to invest for people and return capital to them, and then they want to reinvest.
So we'd say there's really two fundamental reasons. So the first is if you look at waves of innovation over the last century, right? Technology has been the high ground, whether it be advanced manufacturing and the ability to mass machinery in World War II, to the age of the atom bomb, to the age of microelectronics, which we are in now, that is optimized where we're at with the internet age and SaaS, right? And we're really coming to an end of what we would argue is signifying a new wave of innovation. So whether it's Intel or NVIDIA debating whether or not we're at the end of Moore's Law or Moore's Law is approaching its end, the reality is there's going to be a fundamental shift in some of the foundational aspects of what are now frontier technologies, but will soon be the basis of innovation in the next, as we move further into this century. And so we identify an opportunity, especially as the US government and other large public entities identify research and development opportunities to de-risk, as a way to get ahead and help build the bedrock of new foundational technologies and frontier technologies will yield incredible economic return and enable an opportunity to expand the playing field, both in the United States and amongst our economic partners. The second reality is that the global situation in which we find ourselves, it's been much discussed today, it's much discussed in any newspaper at any moment. The reality is that we are already seeing what a global power competition looks like when it becomes a global power conflict. What's happening in Ukraine has forced so many companies, so many organizations, and so many people off the sidelines to make a decision about what role will they play. Will they sit idly by while the arsenal of autocracy pushes in, or will they be part of a system and an opportunity for an arsenal of democracy? And there are a number of different players within that space that are already innovating around what those delivery systems can be. What we need to now do is optimize, not so that we're concerned about conflict, but that we're concerned about our next opportunities economically, so that there's no real chance to compete. And for us, again, that comes back to R&D. And whether you look at the $58.5 billion from chips, whether you look at the success that this United States government has driven in de-risking past innovation and investment, the space economy is a great example. The Commercial Orbital Transportation System, or COTS, started as a way to field capabilities rather than requirements. And what that ultimately yielded is what is estimated to be a $400 billion low Earth orbit economy market. So there is an opportunity for government to work hand in hand with public-private partnerships and investors in order to see these markets and create new possibilities and economic return.
We've talked a lot about great power competition today, and I think with both of the funds and the others that I mentioned, that is part of the investment thesis, right, is ensuring American competitiveness. So, Zach, I know you talked about kind of the investment areas that you're focused on with the fund that you think will be those differentiators. I would love for you to go into a little bit more detail to relist them and why, and then I'd also love to get that same perspective from Matt.
Sure. So the core areas where we're focused right now primarily is in semiconductors and microelectronics. And a lot of that is from the recognition of just how foundational that technology is. Whether we look at the touchpads in the back to control the audio, where we think about the most advanced guidance systems in our LEO satellites or our missile systems, microelectronics is a foundational piece of everyday life now. And you've seen the effects on the battlefield. We've got stories of the Russians pulling off chips from microwaves and putting them in tanks. But we also have the reality of we are never going to break out of cycles of innovation that we're in now if we can't be more rapid and more iterative in terms of how we produce, and also in terms of what capabilities those chips can create. So the economic possibility of what advances in microelectronics could mean for items like strong AI, new design capabilities as a result of our ability to optimize that, and ultimately manufacture those capabilities and commercialize them rapidly, presents extraordinary return potential and opportunity. The other reality is that by not focusing on markets that are already aligned to East Asia extraordinarily, so if you think about the most advanced manufacturing of chips, items that are happening below the 10 nanometer point, all of that now occurs in East Asia. 92% in Taiwan, 8% in South Korea. So we've found ourselves in a bit of a Jenga tower situation, where although the majority of design strategy and automation happens here in the United States, it gets exported in order to be manufactured. And so we have to think about where there's asymmetric opportunities in there, both from a returns profile to build new platforms and capability, but also from a defense and national security perspective. And so for us, there's a clear opportunity there to lean in. There's a clear opportunity to unlock new possibilities, expand the playing field, and drive returns that ultimately orient our capital markets back to reinvesting in core domestic capability.
Excellent, thanks. And if you're here this morning where we talked about the strata game that OODA ran, where we couldn't envision a scenario for future competitiveness, and this was 25 experts, without recapturing some of that microelectronics in the United States, or what we call the friendshoring, reducing the dependency. So Matt?
Well, deep tech is kind of hard to define. It's kind of, we know it when we see it. We do a lot of cyber, we do some traditional networking, we do a lot of AI. We've had a bunch of space. We had, as I said, Rocket and Planet and Capella. We look a lot at autonomy, whether it's self-driving trucks. We had all of our limited partners, and one of my partner brought her portfolio company called Agility. It has robots that are good for pick and pack, just taking boxes and putting them in a truck or something. Just got a very large order from the largest warehouse and delivery company in the world that I can't name. We do climate. Water's a big thesis. We think it's going to get scarcer and going to create more conflict. So we've looked at desal, we've looked at related technologies, other stuff in climate. We've invested in a company that puts seaweed into the fertilizer, to the feed for cows, because a really microscopic amount then reduces the methane that the cows emit. Who knew it? But we've looked at non-food items. That's all sort of under the bio thing. Non-food, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, but non-meat. And then bio has its own separate thing, which gets really techy, and involves cardiac surgery and robotics and stuff like that. We don't do sort of heavy lifting, heavy industry hardware kind of stuff. There's a lot of good stuff going on in that, but we tend to be on the techier end of stuff, and they really like it when computational analysis comes through. It kind of ties back to what you were asking before about why now. I was thinking about something Zach said, and it's been fun over the past 20 years to watch the space industry evolve from the industrial age, where we were bending tin, to the information age, where we're bending pixels. We no longer think, oh, can we bend the tin and get the satellite to do this? It's now, can you bend the information and create some new kind of information product? I want to give a shout out to our friends at In-Q-Tel. I think that Molly Just is around.
She is, yeah.
And she's the liaison for NGA and NRO. And boy, NGA and NRO hopped right on, how can you create different products that show us the Russian movements at night? And I think In-Q-Tel is just a great example of some of the stuff that's happened in the community lately. In-Q-Tel, AFWorks, DIU, taking a little more risk, which is hard for the U.S. government to do, and the people in the room who work for the government, are taking risk with lives. We take risk with money. A lot easier to do that. But taking risk is not easy for an institution like the government writ large, or even the agencies. And having these programs, somebody told me that she went into AFWorks and got a check at the end of the meeting. It wasn't a big check, but she got a check. And I think that's a very positive trend. So that indicates where we think the government can go. And to tie back to your question, a lot of this is based on what Vince said this morning. We're inventing stuff that makes it easier to invent stuff that makes us smarter. As he said, the increase in connectivity. I built a LEO company and then later ran OneWeb, and the increase in connectivity just in the past 2 decades has been phenomenal.
Interesting. I appreciate the shout out to In-Q-Tel, because I was actually going to mention them in my next question. And also want to mention Mission Link Next, which is one of our sponsors. I happen to sit on the board, which is a nonprofit which exposes technology CEOs to current and emerging government technology requirements. We've cycled about 550 CEOs through the program, but it still seems that there is a gap there. So what can we do to better educate the existing business executives, founders, around starting businesses that would meet U.S. government business requirements? So Matt, you're smiling. So
I'm laughing because I was an advisor to Mapbox in the early years. They were an In-Q-Tel company. And I was sitting with a kid, and he had been waiting for his fiancée to do some pre-wedding shopping, and he got bored, and he pasted a shot of the shoreline. He pasted some weather information, and he just created this cool little thing, and he sent it around. And I said, have you shown this to any of our friends in Washington? Now, this kid was the head of product. He said, we have friends in Washington? I said, dude, yeah, and they love us, and you could do good things if you combine information like that. He said, cool. So I don't know. Things like this are a great way to get the dialogue going. That's why we're sponsoring. I think you just have to keep getting the message out. We do it with our younger entrepreneurs all the time. It's kind of hard in California. I will say that there are some of our portfolio companies who, don't want to get too close to Washington. And I have tried to persuade them that it's not all bad. Defending Putin has made it pretty easy lately to come out on the side of the angels and say, what do you want, a kamikaze bomb aimed at a nursery school and a hospital? Why is that a good thing? So I'm not sure there's an easy fix to it. I think we have to keep doing things like this, and I applaud you guys for bringing the community together with business people. I think it's also good to message into the community, because I think there's still some residual, oh, you guys are business people, you just want to make money. And there is some of that, but we can both help each other. So I'm glad that
before we transition to Zach, when you started GOI, were you more excited about the commercial opportunity or the government opportunity, or did you differentiate them in your mind?
So, like I said, I didn't. I'll tell you when Marty Faga said I didn't have a box is there was no commercial industry when I got in, and I was saying the flip side of what I said to the what do you call it, the Mapbox kid. I remember saying, oh, these airports we've mapped for the government, let's sell that stuff to commercial customers like the airport authorities. And I think we were the first to create a 3D digital map of an airport. I got a great compliment. I was flying back from Denver, and by that point the company was big and I was working all the time, so I was sitting in front of the bus. Seaman gets on and I said, hey, sailor, take my seat. He said, no, you keep it, you saved my life. And so in the early days, I said, let's go commercial. And these guys said, no, you can't, that's a government product. And I said, we're not going to sell them what we sold the government. We'll redo it, So we rebuilt this. We created a commercial thing that you could sell to airports. And I said, now I'm going to make it harder. It's got to be a subscription. I'm done with these one-off projects. And again, because I didn't know the rules, we kept doing this stuff. Tish Long, I think, gave me a compliment. It was sort of mixed with an insult. She said, you are one of the toughest businessmen I ever knew, but you're very honest and you are the most creative business guy I've ever dealt with. So, we were happy. We invented, Michael Dell once said, someone said, you don't really do any innovation. He said, I have developed innovative business concepts that let me build the first profitable personal computer company. I think that's pretty innovative. So we did the same thing. We innovated on tech, but also on business practices.
Excellent. Zach, how do we better educate business executives around government requirements?
Well, I think it cuts both ways, right? So I think we have to, it always starts with finding common cause. And I think Don mentioned that before. And I really think that that's such an incredibly important point. Identifying where there's common cause, whether it be do you want the kamikaze drones to be able to do what they can do, which seems like a very obvious answer. Or where are there other opportunities for you to be able to productize and serve certain unique requirements for government. But it's not always about just finding dual use, right? Part of the CYBER program, it's not just exclusively at the Department of Defense. It's also at the National Science Foundation. Much of your iPhone, for all of you who use an iPhone, all of the IP for the touchscreen interface that we so now understand as being an Apple product or a Google product, that was all developed out of NSF grants. So there is real opportunity to identify de-risking opportunities for the productization of interesting IP or interesting ideas coming out of university. We should be able to proudly sell that. And I think the other part of it is to really be able to acknowledge knowing what you know and knowing what you do not know. So where are business executives going to be more informed about iterative cycles? Where is government going to be more informed about the capabilities that they require, whether it be on the battlefield or whether it be in a power utility service provider, right? We have to understand which audience knows what, and we've got to facilitate programs and mechanisms by which one can work with the other in order to do that. And it's not to say that we have to start that from scratch, right? Not to come back to COTS, but we've already seen how portfolio-based approaches that focus on capabilities can be successful. We've also seen where cyber programs have been extraordinarily successful in yielding commercial products. So we have to look at our best practices, share them with one another, and identify ways like this venue, but also in other partnership and opportunities to work together, align incentive, and really get meaningful results to that common cause.
Hey, can I add something on this learning from each other that Zach was talking about? You know, I was saying the IC is moving out really quickly on innovation, which I think is great. I wish I could be as enthusiastic about the DoD. I mean, here's an instance where it's not just business practices. It's not somebody trying to make more money. But we authorize a lot of dough. Oh, you know, let's give support to Ukraine. And people forget that you need people to process those claims. So we are literally with another company living through an instance where Ukraine has asked for defensive drones. This company makes defensive drones, but there's no one who can review the application. They said there are so many applications for bandages and bullets and stretchers. We'll get to you in a couple of weeks. And, oh, by the way, we'll probably have to do an RFP. And so, you know, we'll get you in a couple of months. That's where, you know, when we won in the next few contracts, this is back like 2004, I said the first thing we do, hire more accountants, programs engineers, and to quote Don Meyrick, more systems engineers. And I just knew that if we didn't have the people to process the stuff through the program, we'd get stuck. And so I think it's sort of, you know, a dialogue right now between business people and military leaders, and again, I'm saying military as opposed to defense, I mean to intel, could be really productive.
I want to lean into that comment too, because, you know, the Department of Defense, is, as everyone in this room knows, is an extraordinarily diverse organization, and it's fragmented, right? So what works for one agency may not work for another. I was on a panel down in Austin a couple weeks ago around, can the Army innovate? And as a former Army officer myself, I had to bite my lip maybe a little bit to that 3-star. So hopefully I did a good job. General Todd will have to tell me. But, you know, I think of the difference between what we mean when we say innovate and partner. For an E4 who's working a block in downtown Djibouti as part of a giant counter-China mission, does he have the resources that he needs? Versus how a brigade commander or a division commander may think about what innovation and acquisition means, right? And I think sometimes, ultimately, what ends up happening is that we conflate innovation with acquisition. In reality, it's really a balancing act between the two. And I think we have to get more comfortable and empower some of our leaders to be more comfortable with being able to tailor solutions that are right for them. What is necessarily correct for a counter-narcotics interdiction team with the Coast Guard is not going to be right for a heavy mechanized unit based out of Fort Hood. So being able to iteratively and rapidly move to solutions for those different types of problem sets is a key aspect that the Department of Defense, I think, is still working through.
Go ahead. So this is what happens in Silicon Valley. We all pile on each other and stuff, but as Zach said, we have to iterate quickly. You know, a peacetime procurement process is good and should be deliberate. In a wartime situation, I would submit you probably have to adapt your procurement processes and work a little faster.
To the very name of the conference, right? I mean, John Boyd would be disappointed to hear that we are interrupting our own OODA loop by a procurement cycle. So how do we think about, orient ourselves, decide, and act for solutions that we know have a good answer?
Yeah. That's a great quote. I hope the research team captured that one. It's having a common definition of innovation as well, right? Similar to you, you know, with a very senior executive from the Navy asked a question at a conference. They said, you know, they were talking about innovation. What's something that you've done that's been innovative recently? And the reply was, well, we put a suggestion box on ships. And a young sailor said, why do we have cardboard paper in the cardboard rolls in our toilet paper? We could save weight by excluding it. And we looked at it, and so we did. And I just looked at him with this face where I was just like, gosh, your definition of innovation and my definition of innovation are completely out of parity. But, so, you know, and this ties to, as I alluded to, you know, how tight Dawn is with the zeitgeist of the event. I'm going to use one of her slides as an exemplar. I don't know if you saw the slide where she showed the stages of investment and government making very early risky investments in these technologies, and then it kind of fades into VC and then into later stage equity, private equity, etc. Do you feel like with this, $12 billion that we've circled on our whiteboard of money focused on this space, that we're ready to shift the private sector left and we're ready to make the early stage, higher riskier investments out of your firms? And if so, what would be an example, if you could only fund one thing, if you had to make a big bet over the next 10 years, what space would it be in?
Well, early is
How
easy.
risky are you
We
gonna
do
be?
seed and Series A. I mean, you literally
Seed is
can't
free.
get earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were the first money. I know that we were the first money in an electric truck company because my partner Akko, who is Don knows, is like he goes full at you. He called these guys and said, "I'm going to give you a check for $250,000," and these kids said, "We're not raising money yet. We're just some kids." And he said, "Okay, I'll give you $250,000, but you got to move to Silicon Valley." and so we go in super early. As the fund has gotten bigger, I was happily surprised when I brought in a deal recently, and they said, 3 to 5 million. Come on, Matt. I mean, if it's not 10, I mean, who's going to take it seriously? So we are now putting in larger checks, although we do go early, and we stay in longer.
So if you could make one big bet,
One
not
big
as a
bet.
firm,
Zach,
as you
you
personally.
answer, and then I'll copy you.
All right, that sounds good. I'll be sure to be as opaque as possible. So we do need more partners in all this, in all seriousness. But I think for us, the way that we're thinking about it is there's a significant amount of investment that's taken place from the government, and we're obviously very heartened by some of the data that shows that. Whether it's the CHIPS, $58.5 billion committed, whether it's the 15.6% increase in R&D that we saw in the largest DoD budget envelope submitted by the administration earlier this fall. There's a lot of indicators that are showing that we are getting serious about de-risking certain aspects of innovation right now. I think the reality is that the double chasm problem that we face, getting from lab to market, market to scale, that reality still presents itself. So we have to be very deliberate about the capabilities that we bring to the forefront in order to navigate that. And that's one of the things that AFF is really trying to do. And so for us, we've got a science and technology team that helps us roadmap. We've got a data team that helps us orient and prioritize where we're going to deploy our resources. We convene across industry and government in order to understand where the pain points are. We have taken a very deliberate approach into regional innovation strategy with a regional hub strategy focused on helping build companies out of the lab and out of tech transfer, to help them make sure that they're commercializing to the right priorities. And then very similarly, we invest from Series Seed out to growth in order to make sure that we can get in at the right moment to really help these companies supercharge their growth. So for us, we would say it's a little bit complicated. It's not a very straight answer in terms of being able to say, yes, we can immediately move to the left, but it's a yes, but. Yes, there's opportunity for investors to be more involved in this. Yes, we want to make sure that smart capital follows these opportunities. Yes, we want to make sure that our $46 trillion capital market see the opportunity in our own backyard. But at the same time, we need to be very deliberate about where we make those bets, how we help those companies scale, and the way that we yield results. So where would we place our bets right now?
You get one.
Oh, gosh. All right. I think right
I like
now.
prioritizing.
Yeah, I think right now the ability to advance manufacturing is the area that we are most keen on right now in terms of within the microelectronics space. It gives us an opportunity to, again, iterate and think about the ways in which we can really crack the nut on making sure that new capabilities and new possibilities are developed here first.
We can sell you some great robots.
Outstanding.
I'm going to speak individually, not as DCVC,
Yes,
because we're a
that's
firm.
the
We all have
context of the
different viewpoints. I've always been a products and analytics kind of guy. When I got down to what was called orbital imaging, I moved the satellites out of the lobby, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "They're going in the satellite operating center. We're an information company. We're not a satellite company." And they said, "You're crazy. Go back to New York." The last acquisition I did was we bought a company called OODAc, which was a predictive analytics company. And the folks at Digital Globe made fun of me until our stock went up. And I said, you guys are selling the past and we're selling the future, you know. So I would probably invest in AI. And again, this is a personal statement, not a DCVC statement. But China is no shit ahead of us, folks. I mean, you know, everybody said any number of Melissa Hathaway, who was W. Bush's cyber czar, liaison person, she came back from China years ago, and I said, I can't believe that a Republican's Republican is going to China. And she said, look, man, they are ahead of us and they're going to keep gaining. They have a bigger population who don't mind having their identities profiled or can't object to it if they did mind. And so, you know, they're building this huge database. We have put some bets on AI. We looked at one this week. And sometimes you have to ask, is that really AI? I liked what Vince said this morning. You know, sometimes just think about regular code. But I sort of feel like we are at the point, I remember when people started saying, and our company is enabled by the internet. Well, you know, a kid who worked for me, I was at Sony at the time, this kid said, don't say that, because in a few years, everything is going to be enabled by the internet. I sort of think AI is kind of going to be the same way. And man, I would really hate it if we had to use Chinese AI. When I left Wall Street, I went to work for the guy who started HBO. It really unnerved me to discover that most of the cable companies use Huawei switching. I mean, so we can do whatever we want on cyber stuff, but if my home banking is going through a Huawei switch, I'm just not as happy a guy.
Sure. Two final quick questions, and then we'll let people get to the cookies. The first is kind of a follow-up to that most recent question. So seed stage investing, obviously very early, but the idea exists and entrepreneurs approaching you. Do you think that with this new focus in funding that you might emerge out of entities like yours, the equivalent of the Grand Challenge that I talked about this morning or that Bobby just talked about, or even hackathons to kind of foster new innovation around these requirements? Or is that a bridge too far?
We are friends with the Hack for Defense folks, and we're looking at supporting them. In fact, Capella came out of Hack for Defense. And I think those things are great. I was on the board of USGIF for years, and we had hack-ins, and I think they're very productive. Not to be, let's see, that's where you send the younger people, and they winnow through a lot of chaff. We do have to educate a lot of people. You know, ideas that are good science projects are not necessarily ones that we can fund. I remember sitting in Luxembourg, and they said, well, you would invest in asteroid mining. And I was as diplomatic as I could be. And they said, we don't understand your answer. And I said, that's because I've tried not to answer. I said, no, we wouldn't invest in asteroid mining. Now, Akko recently asked me, you know, you're the space guy, go look at asteroid mining. The problem is that won't return I don't think it'll return capital within, say, 7 years. And we work for pension funds and people like that. So you don't want us to take your pension fund and say, we think it'll make money sometime, somehow. You know, so we are guided by economic principles and have to live with them.
Zach, do you think you would sponsor a grand challenge for technology that doesn't exist?
So for us, you know, we would say that a lot of the biggest opportunities are in research and development that's already happening, right? So if you look at intellectual property that's in the national labs, that's at the universities, a lot of the possible is already being really started. Now it's a matter of how do you actually navigate turning that into a product that can be used, deployed, and scaled. So in terms of, you know, where we see opportunity, we see the research potential and the great record that this nation has to bring that forward. But in terms of national challenges, etc., you know, Hacking for Defense, one of their co-founders, Steve Weinstein, is a general partner on our team. Norman Minarski, who is one of the founding partners at SRI Ventures and co-founder of Siri, he's also on our a general partner on our team. Both Norman and Steve have decades of experience really bringing through these ideas, quite literally intellectual property, and pulling them through to commercialization and scale. And part of our regional innovation strategy is to identify where there are groundswells across the country, where this research, where these opportunities are already beginning to play out, and help supercharge them by being complementary to their local resources, by connecting them to national talent, national capital networks, being able to put expertise to the right challenges at the right moment in order to scale those out. So it's a yes, but answer in this case, but I think there's a ton of opportunity nationally for us to consider. And whether that's autonomy in Detroit, whether that's aerospace in Tulsa, whether it's microelectronics in Columbus, there's a lot of good work happening all across the country, and we can expand the playing field, get more folks involved, and unleash new potential.
Great. Last question, and then we'll move to break. And I also alluded to it first thing this morning that I was going to be asking it. What technology has surprised you the most over the past 5 years? Surprised you the most. The example I gave this morning was the quick development in the DALL-E 2, where 4 months ago it was drawing bad pictures and now it's creating photorealistic images of advanced concepts. Was kind of a surprise for me how rapidly that progressed. Any example of that in the technology space that you've experienced?
So, as I said, we do a lot in robotics. I am not a technologist. I was just a deal guy who fixed a company. We've got these pick and pack robots, and they're kind of cool. They can go up a step, they pick up a box, they can put it in a truck, and for a lot of repetitive tasks, that's really useful. Another guy presented at our partners meeting, and he said, well, everybody knows you can go up through the thigh, go up through the body, you just go up through the vein and send a little sensor. And he said, so I figured, why not automate that? And I thought, holy shit. I mean, I'm not sure I want to be the guy who gets tested on this soon, but where robotics has gone, it just kind of amazes me all the time. I think that their focus on manufacturing probably will benefit more from it than, we're not going to go big into big stuff, but again, the medical thing just amazed me. That the robots have been coming for a while, but I'm still surprised at how much automation. I got a Tesla. I never use the self-driving thing because I don't trust it, right? But it's pretty amazing that it is out there. I said to a young guy, he called me and he was talking, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm talking to you. I said, no, you're commuting. I know what you're doing. You're commuting to the UAE embassy. And I said, you're a young father. You can't be talking to me. He said, no, my car's driving. And I said, no. I said, you get off of that and call me back. But it is still amazing that it's now so commonplace. I'm not saying that is where we should be, but it's gone very fast in the time that I've been looking at it.
So for me, I would step out. So our initial fund will be focused on microelectronics, but one of the other key areas that we're really passionate about is synthetic biology. And I would actually say it offers the most clear path of how quickly a deep tech solution can go from science fiction to a life-altering reality. And I would actually pinpoint the mRNA vaccine. What we were able to do, both under two different administrations, from development during the Trump administration to implementation and rollout during the Biden administration, to get an mRNA vaccine, which was scoffed at a decade ago, and to really effectively change the entire terrain of our experience for a public health emergency is extraordinary. So for me, I would actually pinpoint synthetic biology and specifically mRNA vaccines.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your perspectives, very valuable, and thank you so much for your future efforts in investing in this space. We'll actually take a break for about 20 minutes so you can get some caffeine and some cookies and reconvene to actually talk about AI.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.